Hey guys, I'm Andrew McComb and welcome to Web3 TV. In today's video, I'm with Nikolas, the founder and CEO of Utiliti, and we're going to dive deeper into the most commonly asked questions people are asking in regards to what is Web3. But before we do, make sure you register to watch every episode of Web3 TV here, where we share inspiring stories of all things Web3, making a difference to the world. All sorted? Okay, let's go. Guys, in this episode of Web3 TV, we've collated some of our viewers' most commonly asked questions in regards to Web3 in a bid to help someone new to this space understand it a lot more. So to help me, I'm with Nikolas, the founder and CEO of Utiliti. Nick, would it be okay for you to share some of your wisdom around some of the biggest questions that we get in relation to Web3?
Absolutely. I would be happy and excited to.
Awesome. And guys, if you've missed it, we actually filmed a What is Web3 video, which I'll put the link above here for you. So I'll give you a little bit more of a background, and then this is an extension on that. But first question, Nick, is what is Web3? We're just going to preset it for guys if they're new to this video and they've only just found us through this one. And then we'll get into the other frequently asked questions.
Yeah, sounds good. And what is Web3, right? It's a nebulous catch-all term that probably scares people at home who don't know anything about it. But in its most useful iteration, right, Web3 is an evolution of the internet, right? It's been made a buzzword, and it's been repeated so many times by people who know so little about it that it's almost to some extent become meaningless. But if we're looking at it strictly from the most meaningful definition that people can think of, right, it's an evolution of the way that people interact with each other on the internet. So you think about Web 1 was read, right? Static web pages. You just consume information that people put out there. Barrier to entry to contributing to this world was very difficult. Web 2, read, write, right? It's the evolution of the forum, Facebook, MySpace, right? People can read, people can write, people can communicate with each other online and put content into the internet. Web 3 is read, write, own, right? With this new technology, this new digital primitive, the blockchain, you are able to lay a claim of tangible ownership over anything produced in this digital world by people, be it JPEGs, which I think everybody's already aware of, or a lot of people are already aware of from the news, and financial instruments, which have been much maligned. But past that, it's ownership of things like posts, like media, like music, right? It's ownership of anything that exists in this digital world, and it's a way to lay a claim of ownership over those things in the digital world. That's what Web3 is, right? It's a new means of interacting in the internet.
Excellent description. So another part of Web3 is blockchain. What is blockchain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So blockchain is a means of establishing consensus between people that something exists somewhere. In the abstract, right, it's a ledger. So think about it like a Excel spreadsheet, and it solves this problem of what is in the spreadsheet, right, in absence of anybody in particular having to say, yes, these are the things in the spreadsheet, right? Historically speaking, it was created to solve the double spend problem, right? Back in 2009 by Satoshi Nakamoto, who proposed the Bitcoin white paper, right? It was created to solve this issue of how do you know who has what money, and to make sure that people can't spend the same money twice in absence of a bank saying who has what money and where, right? It is a solution to this issue, right? It's a solution of this, capturing value in a particular place and being able to tell that, yes, it does exist in this particular place in the absence of anybody in particular saying, yes, it does, right? And so what the blockchain is in the context of solving this problem, right, is a decentralized network of computers that establish agreement over what is where in new means of consensus, right, called blockchain, right? So every so often, the computers arrive at consensus and mine a new block, right, to stick on the end of this chain of blocks that have been mined that say what is where in this ledger, right? And so it sounds very technical and it's very jargon heavy, but at the end of the day, what it means is that you can, in absence of having to trust anybody, any bank, any person, right, understand that something is somewhere, right? In the case of ownership, right, something is owned by somebody without anybody except for this sort of trustless network of computers saying so, right? So if I have a song that I created, right, in a wallet, right, an account in non-blockchain terms, then the blockchain knows through consensus of these computers, right, that I was the one who created that song and that I own it, because provenance has been established in this sort of ledger of record keeping, right? I think that's the best TLDR for it, right? And at the end of the day, in one sentence, right, the blockchain is, a distributed ledger where the contents of it are verified by a network of supercomputers.
Very good. And why would we use blockchain over, say, a Web2 database?
That's a good question. And in most cases, you probably should, right? There's a lot of cases where a Web2 database makes a lot more sense, right? If it's, internal information serving, right? Information storage by corporations, right? A Web2 database like a MongoDB or a DynamoDB on AWS is going to make a lot more sense. They're more performant. You have the span of control you need over the database contents. You don't probably want to use a blockchain. The cases where you do want to use a blockchain is when there are, I would say, mass networks of people who need to agree upon the contents of the database, right? So it becomes especially useful in the early stages in the context like supply chain, right? It's like multiple different suppliers establishing consensus over what is where as it moves to a supply chain. Now it is useful in the context of people being able to agree as the concept of blockchain has proliferated, right? As this technology has become more useful to people, it's like people being able to agree that, person X owns Y in this digital world, right? It's like, I own this picture, I own this song, I own this token, right? This money, in absence of any, bank or anybody else having to say that I own it. I'm able to own it, right? So it becomes useful when you're establishing consensus around data between multiple parties that are distributed who wouldn't otherwise be able to trust each other.
Very good. So it sounds a ledger of records or ownership, but what are the other purposes of the blockchain? Because I believe, or I can sense that when we have that ownership back, it also brings other benefits to the consumer or to the user.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's I think what we're about to start seeing, and I think that's what a lot of people are working on, myself included, is now you can extend the concept of ownership over this digital world, meaning that I can own some digital representation of a picture or a song or, even a social graph, right? My followers and media published on a social media platform. What can then be done to improve the lives of the people if they can indeed own things that they previously couldn't? I think, most pressingly, we're seeing a new model of organization crop up built on the back of the blockchain, right? It's like, this, I would say, without decrying it, right, this capitalist system that we live inside is fantastic at doing a lot of things, fantastic at motivating people to produce value for the world, because people live and die by the value that they produce to the world, but imperfect in scenarios where, the entire value of a company is created by a network of users on top of it, right? So I think the best example here, and the most easy to understand example here, is in banking, right? I, as a user of a bank, produce all the value for the bank by giving them my money to hold on to, right? Like the bank earns all of its money to pay its executives by holding onto my money and then facilitating transfers of assets from one asset to another with that money, right? That's what the bank does. But code is doing that. Today, code is doing that, right? It's just X's and O's in one database moving to another database controlled by the bank. And so it doesn't exactly stand to reason that bankers at that bank should have these massive exorbitant salaries, because all that's really happening is computer code is moving around. So what the blockchain unlocks in the near term, right, is the replacement of sort of centralized entities who would otherwise have to own digital primitives like money in order for people to do anything with them, with sort of this protocol foundation model where instead of some black box that is drawing needless salary from the moving around of my X's and O's on the database, right, you're able to create on the blockchain protocol, right, some system of programming whereby money might be moved around for me as a consumer, and then a foundation, right, some decentralized network of humans who are appropriately incentivized to maintain this protocol, right, without needlessly extracting from the protocol to the detriment of the return that I might get from the platform, right? I think most people, irrespective of the taste they have in their mouth about blockchain and some of its use cases in crypto, can agree that, like, maybe the modern banker, if their entire job is done by a computer, in most cases, 90% of the time, right? Doesn't necessarily need to exist if they could be replaced with code that leaves more return on the plate for a person like me.
Sounds exciting. As a truth sayer, it sounds like a lot of authenticity and the record keeping, and obviously transparency. And I guess it also potentially leads to scarcity, which brings me to one of our most popular questions: is what is an NFT?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the technical term is non-fungible token. That's what it stands for. And I think that's been lost, right? It's just people know them as NFTs. You have celebrities releasing them, presidents releasing them, sports teams releasing them. It's a funny world wherein this technology is being introduced to this world in the most basic possible way. And so an NFT, right, is I think in its simplest form, a record of ownership of something, right? So on the blockchain, an NFT, a non-fungible token, is just a hash, right? It's a string of numbers that are completely unique that can be marked inside one person's ledger or another and traded from ledger to ledger, from account to account, right? And what the hash points to, right? That's what most people know as an NFT. And so a lot of cases, the hash will point to a JPEG. In some more unique cases, the hash will point to a song, right? And so by virtue of owning this hash, right, owning this token, through the blockchain, I'm able to lay a claim of ownership over whatever the token points to, right? And you know, that link between the token and whatever it's pointing to, be it a picture of a president or a song or a video or a social graph, right? That's mine because I own the token on the blockchain, and that's, you know, what an NFT is. It's a non-fungible token that confers me, you know, ownership of whatever this is, whatever thing that I happen to own in this digital world.
And how do you envision, say, businesses using NFTs, and what types of industries do you think could benefit the most from the technology?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a progression, right? In the near term, I think we're seeing a lot of movement on this technology in the areas of, you know, fashion and entertainment, right? And I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg as far as what can be done. Like in a lot of cases, historically speaking, in the last couple of years, people have just sold the NFTs as a financial instrument. It's something extra as far as a product that I can sell. Today, some of the companies that we're working with, sort of multinational retailers, they're thinking about NFTs as something to be given for free for their best customers, as a way for them to understand more about who these customers are, right? So just take, for an example, you're a multinational department store, you want to drive foot traffic into your retail location, right? So you give the NFTs that you have available to your best customers, the ones who are showing up the most, who are buying the most, and put them on sort of a mountain for people to go earn them, right? Then you know that if you've made the sort of, you know, requirements for being able to acquire one of these NFTs strict enough, then only your best customers are likely to have them. And then by proxy, you have a group of your best customers holding onto a particular token, which allows you to serve them messages, give them offers, give them deals, give them bonuses, hear from them directly, and silo them in a community to form a customer focus group where you can learn, you know, everything you need to know without spending millions of dollars on customer focus groups, direct from the 10% of the people that produce 90% of your revenue. And that's, you know, next 6 to 12 months, I think we start seeing that a lot more. It's a value, a form of value to be given reciprocally to customers from businesses, to unlock sort of, you know, more value, more offers, more revenue for these businesses from the consumers getting the NFTs. I think, you know, as we progress, it's sort of in the hands of builders, like the folks building on our platform, to determine how useful and how quickly these become useful. But you think about anything in the digital world can then be owned in the form of a token, right? Anything is a lot of things, right? So today it's just JPEGs, and later I think we'll see songs and videos, and as we progress, it becomes more complicated, right? If you can own anything in the digital world, then you can own a ticket, right? And if a marketplace for these NFTs is sort of a, you know, a protocol that you can tap into, just the same as the internet, then it means that you no longer need sort of middlemen and extractive third parties to be facilitating asset transfers like tickets, if these tickets are just NFTs and they can be openly traded, right? It's like more value captured by consumers, more value captured by producers, less non-value added middlemen. And I think that that's true in anywhere where there's tickets, right? Anywhere where there's bookings, right? And I think that that's phase two. We'll see that 2-3 years. I would expect most sort of, you know, transfers of value that occur on the internet, intangible value like a ticket, right? Ticket's just a right to do something at some point in time facilitated by some company, right? It's totally intangible. If it exists in the digital world, it'll be an NFT, right, that you can own. And then, what is an NFT, right? It can go even as sort of ethereal as like social graphs, consumer data, right? These are all tokens, things that are ethereal that exist in the internet that I can then own, right? That I can then voluntarily share with companies. And so to that regard, it's sort of, an NFT represents the future of customer relationship management between businesses and users, right? If I own all of my data, I can give it freely to the companies that choose to use it to serve me in a way that I'm aligned with, right? Then an NFT becomes the future of consumer data management for large corporations. It's a good thing, right? It's like, I think everybody's familiar with how hard some of these companies have been slapped with billions of dollars of fines by the EU for carrying customer personal identifiable information on their balance sheets. An NFT represents an opportunity for a business to not have to do that, and for me as a consumer to voluntarily share that with a corporation without being able to having to sign my life away, right? Sign my data away forever. And that's what I see, now, right? And then as we progress, right, an NFT, I think becomes a lot of different things, right? And hopefully eventually everyone just stops calling them NFTs. No one talks about sort of the HTTP or the TCP layer of the internet today. These are fundamental technologies powering this video that we're recording right now. Nobody's referred to them as that in tens, maybe dozens of years. And by the same token, I think this, continually naming this technology, it sort of fades to the background as the technology becomes more ubiquitous, and then it's just common knowledge that you can own things on the internet without any regard for how exactly that happens.
Yeah, it just sounds to me in a one sentence it's a recognized form of digital ownership that I can trade if I choose to.
Yes, I could have probably been that succinct right from the start, but me, I like to wander, right? What could this be? It could be anything. And I think that's what's interesting for people to hear about, right? It's like, that's why I want to rant about it so much. It's like, no, it's not just a monkey JPEG, right? It's not just a financial instrument. It is potentially, all of your data, or, your license to drive a car, or your ticket to go to France next month, right? Anything.
Yeah, which is, again, I just feel the power coming back to the individual with that. It's if you want my data, it's going to cost you X, and then it's fully trackable and it's transparent on the blockchain, which is, it's pretty exciting for anyone who's interested in freedom, right? So the other thing we mentioned there was a general the industries that might benefit the most. So what I'm hearing is, say you mentioned ticketing, so sport, concerts, travel, I guess, if people are wanting to buy hotels or flights or whatever, could be of benefit, would you say?
Definitely, right? Anywhere where there is a digital asset that somebody owns, right? And then some third network of third parties to facilitate that ownership, right? It's like, I think the real beauty of the blockchain and the early infancy stages of this space is that, like, it only really has value if it proves its value to consumers, right? It's like, if everybody agrees that the NFT equals whatever thing out there in the world, right, be it a ticket or a booking, right, then it does, right? Same with money, right? It's only valuable because we all agree that it's valuable, right? And so it's sort of rebuilding from first principles how we can and should deal with things like tickets, things like digital assets in the most user-friendly way possible, because all of this only works if critical mass of users together, right, decide that this is the way that it works, in absence of any centralized entity getting to say that this is how it works. So should be interesting to see what exactly people establish consensus on. I think ticketing is coming. I think entertainment, definitely, right? Booking, past that, voting, right? Identification, right? Medical records, insurance claim settlement, right? Anywhere where there's processes filled with friction and sort of nebulous, very conceptual digital assets that people can own and have attributed to themselves, right? This is an opportunity for everyone to decide from first principles, like, how should this work in a perfect world where it serves me the most?
Yeah, so on paper it looks exciting, right? But with all the hype and, dare I say, horseshit, the skepticism,
Yeah.
and general madness that's going on in the crypto space at the moment, why should we trust Web3 and where it's heading?
Right, that's a great question. And I think what I point to is this pie analogy, right? It's like, here's a pie that is Web3. Crypto is just this. It's just a tiny slice, and has been sort of the easiest entry point and the loudest implementation of this technology. But I think in the grand scheme of history, it will be probably perhaps the most inconsequential compared to the rest of what is being created and what will be created, right? So like, you don't have to trust crypto to or even like crypto or even deal with crypto to host your data in a decentralized file storage system like IPFS because it's 10 times cheaper than existing file storage alternatives, right? It's sort of, it's a nebulous, poorly branded term today that sort of alludes to crypto. But I think as we progress, right, the reason that people will trust Web3 and sort of these possibilities that it is unlocked for people is because it's proven itself eminently useful, right? It's like, you can not trust crypto all day long, but if you have a file storage solution that's going to cost you 10 times less and be permanent, right, without any worry about a data center being collapsed on your part, then you're going to store your files there just because it's simply easier and more friendly to you to do so, right? So I think in the near term, right, all of us who are building in this space have to make it more useful for people, make it easier for them to access the technology, make it a little bit more intuitive, let's say. But the reason to trust it is because, leaving aside all these terrible bad actors and idiots, and like you said, horse shit, right? It's like, that's 10% of the pie, and the rest of the 90% is very smart people working, in service of people being able to own things that are meaningfully, improving their lives, like social graphs, medical records, tickets, travel, things like this.
Mm. And so how we can build more trust, or how can we build more trust, I guess, from a creator and development perspective to reduce the risk of all the fraud and the bad actors that are going on in the Web3 space? What are you guys doing, say, at Utility to help that process?
Yeah, I've said this before. I think it's a narrative problem, right? Like, Uber was much maligned by governments and decried in the news when it came out, right? Everybody said, "Oh, they're killing taxis. This isn't fair, right? This is horseshit," right? And I think, in advance of them potentially being regulated out of existence, they proved themselves so eminently useful to users, right, to consumers, that the outcry was so large that it was demanded that they continue to operate in every single place where they operated, pretty much, right? It's like they got to exist because they proved themselves so useful that the world couldn't imagine itself without it, right? So I think that's what needs to happen with some of this technology, right? It needs to be made more accessible, right, to users, and it needs to be implemented in a way where it's more useful to users, such that users might be able to agree that, hey, yeah, this is eminently useful. What we're doing in this context, right, it's a two-sided problem to attack, right? Like, on one hand, you have mainstream users who can't access this technology because they, it's unfamiliar. The processes for getting a crypto wallet or a blockchain wallet is tedious, and you have to learn a bunch of new technologies and expose yourself to risk, and it's not friendly. And so we're building infrastructure that supports mainstream user onboarding into this space, into having wallets without them necessarily having to, log in a way that's unfamiliar. Log in with a social, and then pull your keys out, own your assets if you want to, whenever you want to. That's one piece of infrastructure we're working on in this area, right? And then past that, it's decentralized logins, right? Like allowing people to spin up these wallets with familiar accounts and then decide to own them when they choose to. That's number two. And then this side of the problem, right? It's like, it's developers, it's builders, it's companies who are doing things in this space. Part of the reason I'm so passionate about this is I feel like the spaces look so dumb and so silly, and it has been very fairly maligned to the public because it's been so complicated over here, right, to develop anything on the blockchain, that most of the reason anybody has done it, historically speaking, has been simply to get money, right, which is not great. It's very, very less than ideal. And so our mission over here is basically like, hey, let's provide a suite of tools, right? A suite of APIs for the technical that allow anybody, no matter their background, to build on any blockchain they want to without having to learn anything new about coding, right? It's like, if we make it so cheap and so easy for people to develop on the blockchain all these audacious things that I talked about, like new means of facilitating ticket transfer, right, then they won't have to go try to get money immediately. It'll be just as cheap as building on AWS or running electricity, right? And so that's the way we're attacking this problem. It's like easier for users, cheaper and easier for builders. And if we do that successfully, then the hope is that somewhere in the middle, right, people en masse will be able to benefit. People en masse will be able to build things that create this benefit, right? And then the world can start to, move forward in a way that makes this technology make sense.
And in addition to that complicated or reducing that complication or that friction on onboarding into Web3 that Utility's doing, what are you guys doing? And I guess what's the industry doing to increase the trust or security safety perspective that, going back to those bad actors and what appeared to be genuine businesses, rug pulling people or, totally imploding altogether and going to jail, etc. And hopefully we won't be having this conversation in the future, but that seems to be the present day reality of a lot of it. And I know we talked about it being, that's primarily in the crypto space, but how do we build trust other than the narrative and decomplicating things for the consumer that's out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think this problem is twofold. It requires behavior change on the part of the people who are acting in this space, and I think that behavior is forced by the market, right? Like part of the reason people have historically been empowered to do all these crazy rugs and steal all this money is that people were really ready and willing to give them that money as speculative investors, right? They were here for the next 1000x, right? They were here because the space represented a means of getting rich quick, which if you've got 1 million people ready and willing to fork over their next dollar to anybody who might purport to get them rich quick, then obviously some of those people doing that purportation, right, are bad actors. And so I think like as we progress, the audience shifts a bit, right? Like most of the people who are here using this technology and benefiting from this technology and building on it are not going to be people who are necessarily speculative investors so much as people who are just, here to build something cool that maybe is more user-friendly than something that could previously exist, or here to benefit from that user-friendliness. And there will be no conversation of investment one way or the other. It won't be coins, tokens, and other such nonsense, because it's just, I think the space has kind of run out of appetite for that. And so it's sort of, in that sense, it's behavior change, right? It's like not viewing this as a place for speculative financial instruments so much as a place for cool, user-friendly new technology. And then past that, I think it is sort of putting guardrails up, right? Like the analogy I like is sort of like you ever go bowling and you have the gutters, right? It's to kind of give people walls to bounce off where they can't really hurt themselves. For our purposes, right? Like ultimately, when we allow people to pull their keys out of our wallets, right? So say they created a wallet with a Google account, now they have keys, they can then claim ownership of those keys. We remove all trace of those keys so that they own those keys. The wallet infrastructure that we're providing them when they go sign transactions will provide a plain text translation of whatever in the world they're dealing with in this world, right? If they want to go sign a transaction or connect their wallet to something, our infrastructure will be spitting out via AI a short description in a language that your grandmother could read and interpret easily. Like, what in the world are you dealing with? Like, don't, this protocol is going to do X, Y, and Z to your funds. Do you want that to happen? Like, no, probably not. Right. And so, yeah, culture shift, guardrails for people, I think. And for everybody who says like, it's like, oh, there's just no way there'll be adoption here. It's like, I would suggest you go look at what the internet looked like in 1997. The UX was not pretty. Absolutely not. I remember very distinctly in the back of my head that dial-up noise for me to try to get to connect. It was an absolute pain. It's not like those early chat rooms were exactly safe, but you move forward because good actors build with the tools, and then you end up at something that's actually useful.
Okay, and speaking of the consumer, now that they've got a bit more knowledge, they now know what they don't know and they're willing to take a step, why should they care about Web3? And then when they want to get started, where do they start? And obviously it's a rhetorical question. And then what do they need to get started?
Yeah. Why should you care, right? You care because for the good actors and the builders in this space who are developing things that might help the world, right? These are things that will make your life eminently more convenient. I go back to this example of the social graph, right? You should care because now on certain social platforms, you can own your social graphs. Like, what is a social graph? It's your followers and it's your content that you're publishing to social media, right? You should care because in a world where you own that in absence of any Facebook or YouTube saying that you own that, right? That's value that you created that you get to keep, right? It's valuable for you. It's valuable value that you can take to another platform if the platform you built it on behaves badly, right? And so it's it's interesting for you to participate to the extent that this technology has become useful is because it's actually more useful, right? And it gives you an early start on sort of, the world that the mainstream population is yet to be welcome to, but will be eventually, because it provides solutions and experiences that are eminently more user friendly than previously possible, right? How do you get started, right? It's like, in the case of the social graph, you can look up Lin's protocol. That's the name of the protocol where you can own your social graph. And then there's a bunch of social networks built on top of it, worth exploring. But I think in a broader sense, right, it's just education, right? It's like digging one layer deeper past the whole, this is a scam, this is a financial instrument, this is a Ponzi, this is useless to everybody. It's like, dig past the noise and see areas where you think this might improve your life, and then get a handle on the people who are building in this space who might do something useful for you later, right? There's plenty of education out there, and so it's just finding voices that you trust and publications that you trust. Like The Block is a good one in absence of the bad behavior of their CEO. It's reading to understand, like, what does this look like in absence of continued focus on needless financial instruments.
And what about for business owners? Why should they care?
Well, I mean, the conversation that we're having a lot, and that most of the larger corporations that we work with are starting to understand, it's like, hey, it's get on board or get left behind, right? It's like, it's not so eminently useful today that you're going to be left behind without it, but it's rapidly approaching that place, right? Like, what we're seeing in early tests from the corporations that we work with who are giving NFTs to their best customers and forming customer focus groups there, 4 to 5% revenue uplift from those customers who hold those NFTs. Right. And that's not unsubstantial, especially when it's the top 10% of your customers that are producing that revenue. I think it's pay attention because it represents a new way to do business and a new way to relate to your consumers and to offer them something valuable and interesting and understand more about them, right? And I think those that do move on this and implement this in a way where it actually makes sense and adds value to their consumers, these are the people that win, right? And business is a zero-sum game to some extent, right? And so it's, pay attention and at least learn a bit how you might deploy some of this technology, or risk having a competitor deploy it and be more effective at capturing interest from your customers.
And would they learn about this from a different space to the consumer, or they, obviously they could they talk to you directly to learn more about the possibilities for their business? And then if so,
yeah,
what do they need? Like, other than talking to you, what would they then need to get started?
Yeah, good question. So, I mean, I'm obviously happy to talk to people. I spend a lot of my time talking to big brands and advising larger companies. Having escaped from Amazon and having worked with these larger companies for most of my adult life, it's sort of, this is a world that's familiar to me, and I'm happy to go have that conversation for free, right? It's like, not here to consult you or charge you. It's more just like, here's how you can think about it. And so, absolutely feel free. My contact info is likely in the link. But past that, it's it's getting an idea of who's building real things and who's thinking about this the right way and who's not. We know quite a few. We have quite a few partners in this area. Brightloom is a great company. Forum 3 is a great company. Vayner 3 is a great company. All consulting, right? Who will implement our technology for people. And I think it's just like, like, it's kind of a trope, but it's like DYOR, do your own research, right? Like, dig in and figure out how you might use this in a unique way. Because the reality is, at this point, people are still trying to figure it out. Like, I don't think anybody's got the perfect formula for implementing this technology. But I think if you put your consumers as your North Star, go educate yourself and go learn about how you can implement it, and then pull the trigger, right? Work with folks like us to implement this technology into your business. Or plenty of the other great folks out there who can help with that. It's like, let's say you move on it just carefully, but in recognition of the fact that, hey, this is paradigm changing and it's worth looking at.
And for the early adopter businesses out there who are interested and are proactive, are there any pioneers in the space, like entrepreneurs or large corporates or whatever, who've already made the steps and are seeing success? You mentioned a 4 to 5% uplift already. So clearly there are some successful use cases, and you don't have to mention names, but do you have any examples of what they've done and how it's benefited the consumer?
Yeah, great question. So I think so we're working with a few multinational retailers who are moving on this quickly. I think aside from that, one of the cool ones I'd point to is Starbucks, right? They just rolled out their Web3 digital loyalty program, where they're allowing their users to earn NFTs. They're siloing those users off in a Discord. They're learning from those users about what more they want, right? And they're using it as a way to honestly, drive consumption of product that benefits their supply chain, right? It's like quests and stamps and rewards for consumers in exchange for those stamps that drive consumption of goods that might be expiring soon, right? It's very genius. And I think that's a great one. Past that, you can look at Crown Royal just recently. My grandpa's favorite whiskey. They recently did an NFT drop where they were giving them out to their best customers, and I thought that was pretty cool. And most of those companies, what they're doing behind the scenes, right? I would point to the work that Salesforce is doing. There some great guys over there, Max Comparito and Matt Sweezy, who are allowing systems like mine to be interoperable with brands and their existing CRMs, their existing Salesforce instances, so that they can actually use this technology to understand more about their customers who are already living inside of their CRM.
Very cool. And I guess this is another question for the guys behind the scene, the developers and the creators. And obviously you get to meet a lot of them on a regular basis, but why should they care about this? Because clearly it's going to be a burgeoning industry for them. And then what do they need to do to get started to take them out of Web 2 and migrate into Web 3?
Yeah. Great question. I think it's going to be a more and more valuable skill set, right? Like you assume on a long enough time horizon, technology that is eminently more user-friendly ends up broadly adopted because it's more user-friendly. I think that's obvious, right? Like the internet was adopted for that reason. Amazon wins in every market they enter for that reason. You assume that the pool of people today that can build in this world are very small, right? Creators and developers alike. It's a very small pool of people, and it means that salaries in this area are correspondingly high, right? So the reason to participate is like, hey, there's a lot of growing demand for developers in this area. And this is not an area where your job can be disrupted by AI just yet, like everybody's worried about, right? It's an area where it's very manual and there's not a lot of information, and it requires smart people who are driven to go learn about it. And then people are rewarded in kind, right? And what can you do? I think there's a lot of different platforms, areas for education. I'd point to like Build Space and Third Web and a few of the DAOs like Learn Web 3 DAO, Calypsis, right? Some of these education platforms where you can upskill yourself as a developer, rare skills, upskill yourself as a developer to go learn, what does it take for me to build in this world, right? And then once you start building, it's platforms like mine, right? Like what we're building is a gateway to mainstream adoption in a sense, right? It's like a platform where any developer can pick a coding language, whatever coding language they want, and build on the blockchain, build with this Web3 technology, right? And integrate it into any tech stack without having to learn anything new. So, it's sort of finding the right tools and finding the right people to learn from. And I think that's how you capitalize.
So much great content, Nick. You mentioned earlier, was it Stanford oversubscribed in a blockchain course? So clearly, if you're a developer, you really should get in quick because you might miss out on the courses and stuff. But the salaries that you're mentioning are quite an attractant, right? It's scarcity at the moment. People are paying quick, so definitely worth getting amongst it. Nick,
I can tell you anecdotally, right? We're hiring a blockchain developer or hiring for a blockchain developer role right now today at $250,000 a year. It's in-demand skill set. Yeah.
And it's only going to get more and more requirement, right? You're going to have more and more need for that, as are many other companies. So finally, Nick, it's a question I guess I ask all our experts, and clearly you're one of them. You give so much great wisdom and free content to the viewers. But if there was one overriding message that you believe needs to be shared or understood about the future of Web3, what is it?
I go back to that pie analogy, right? It's like what everybody has heard, what my mom's heard, my family's heard. It's not what's out there, right? It's like 10%, maybe 5% is crypto and NFTs and scams and scary things, the monster under the bed. And the rest of it is like some of the smartest people on earth working so that this new technology, this new digital primitive that sort of underlies this new internet can be used to the benefit of people like you and me, right? It's like these people working on this idea that you should be able to own your social graph or own the money that is earning return for you in a bank, or own the work that you created as an artist and lent out to a music platform, right? These are people who have been working on this for a long time, and they're extremely smart, and they've been working for the benefit of mainstream people, right? These aren't people who are creating financial instruments just to steal from people. These are people who are trying to put power back into the hands of the people, right? And so I think, the biggest lesson or the biggest learning that I would hope people take away from this is, like, despite what you hear, right, that is a sensational 2% of what is actually going on, and what is actually going on is mostly very good people trying to change the world for the better. I think it's incumbent on all of us, if you hear this and you like the idea of maybe there is a future where I own my social graph, or all these things that I mentioned, right? It's like, dig a little bit deeper, go find those people, support them. Go post on the decentralized social network, go contribute to the decentralized Spotify killer, right? Go pay attention to the things that aren't necessarily even blockchain, right, but that are going to change the world from this just new decentralized lens, right? So yeah, give it a shot, stay open-minded.
Yeah, open-minded, give it a shot. And obviously, if you're into power to the people, then that's the message I'm hearing here. Sovereign individuality with owning your own digital assets. It's pretty exciting. So guys, if you've watched this and you've really enjoyed it, and you maybe have a question for Nick, or maybe you want to share below in the comments what you think of Web3, and maybe whether it's changed since watching this interview. Also what industry you think might burgeon in the space, or even what you're doing as a potential vision, and you want to share that, and you want maybe some support with that. Feel free to put some comments below. If you've got a question for Nick, are you happy to answer any questions that come on? And then obviously take that to the next level by going to the Utiliti. I'll put the link below here as well, the utiliti.ai website, so that people can engage with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm more than happy to talk to anybody, right? Like, I think, it's the root of this message that I'm trying to convey is basically, like, there are a lot of us here who are here with open arms trying to build real things to help people. And so in that regard, I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to learn. I think please get in touch, right? You can check out our website. You can contact me directly on LinkedIn, Nikolas Moore. You can, any number of ways, however you contact me, I'm likely to respond. I'm perma online, always working. And so we'd be happy to hear from you. And, if you're a builder or you're a company who's building in this space, like, let's talk about what you want to build, because I think, like, the best part of my job today is as a sort of foundational infrastructure for this space, right? Like, getting to hear the crazy ideas for things that people are going to build on top of our platform.
Yeah, and so many are making a difference too, Nick. And obviously, like yourself, you're fundamentally trying to do this to make a difference to the world. So guys, if you'd love to hear Nick's journey into Web3, we've actually put an interview together with Nick and his background, and his CMO, Alexander. So we'll put a link to that here as well. Nick, as always, mate, love the wisdom, love the thought leadership, and so many great questions being answered. I know it's early days in the space. The future is bright, and really want to say thank you from Web3 TV for being one of our thought leaders and coming on the show. Really appreciate it, mate.
Hey, absolutely. Anytime. And honestly, as always, honored to be here. I appreciate your time, Andrew. And I'll try to use less technical jargon in the next one, make it easier.
Well, mate, that's why I'm here, yeah, to simplify the complex. That's one of my geniuses, I guess, and obviously the vision behind Web3 TV. So, Nick, really look forward to hearing about your interview, and we'll see you there. Well, there it is, guys. I hope you enjoyed this Web3 TV episode. If you've got any questions, leave them in the comments below. And remember, if you'd like to watch every episode of Web3 TV, visit the link below or subscribe to our channel. And remember to hit the bell icon so that we can notify you every time a new episode is released. I'm Andrew McComb, and I look forward to sharing more inspiring Web3 TV episodes, making a difference to the world. I'll see you soon.